Yo, what up? It's your boy, man. Back out here with another video. Still at work, man. I'm always at work. You know, they call me 100 Jobs Cop. But some of you might be wondering, hey, why you got a beanie on? It's like 80 degrees outside. It's because I'm bald headed. So that air be hitting my skull, making me cold. So, get the beanie on until the sun come out. Then I'm going to take it off. But then I got to be careful because, you know, when the sun hit my head at a certain light, it refracts and then motherfuckers be getting blind and shit. So, nah, I'm just messing around. But good morning, man. It's Sunday. You know, I wanted to do another reaction with y'all while I'm out on this patrol. You know, because I'm top flight security of the world. So I'm gonna play the audio and we'll go from there. This is chapter one of Blackguard Way of the Askari. Let's get into it.
1. Flames of the Mind. A raging inferno engulfed Uzuma, its heat searing his skin and burning his lungs. He screamed for his mother, but no sound escaped his lips. Tears rained from his eyes like floods of despair as the flames rose higher and higher around him. Embers fell from the ceiling like falling stars, goading him as he crawled like a frightened animal toward his parents' bed. A spear stuck out from his father's chest like an accusing finger, and a pool of blood pooled on the floor round him.
This is the introduction to the character of Uzuma, who is one of the main characters of the series. There's two main characters, dual protagonists. You have Uzuma and Ru. When I'm writing the series, I plan to go back and forth between both characters. So this book, the first one, mainly revolves around Uzuma's journey of getting over um, his parents' death. So we see this build up of how he internalizes the fear of losing his family, and then we see how that contrasts with his adopted brother, Root.
The hate in his father's brown eyes seemed to be a searing reminder of death itself, leering at Uzuma with an intensity that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He heard the thunderous crash of the door flung against the wall, and his heart raced as he stepped away from his father's lifeless body and toward the entrance. His mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale and streaked with tears. He rushed forward to catch her as she collapsed into his arms, but he did not have the strength yet to hold her up. Their embrace was all too brief when Uzuma felt the hilt of the dagger. The blade had already pierced her skin. She rolled onto her back, her eyes wide with fear, and stroked his face as she parted her lips to speak. But all he could hear was the crackling of the raging flames as they engulfed the room.
So you saw his father with spear sticking out his chest, and his mother stabbed in the back, and he's just house is burning down. He doesn't know what's going on, and he's just a little kid that's just afraid and sad. That's what he's saying. Like, oh my God, what is going on? And he carries that with him throughout this whole first book.
She stroked his face again and moved her lips, but he could not make out the words over the roar of the fire. Uzuma's heart sank as he watched her fall to the ground, blood oozing from her lips. He desperately wanted to look away, but the sudden transformation of her black locks turning gray and her skin becoming cold and pale kept his gaze firmly locked on her. He felt her hand tighten around his arm, keeping him in place despite the flames that were quickly bearing down on them. Sweat ran down his face as he stared into her dead white eyes. "Uzuma," she spoke. "Uzuma!" He slowly opened his eyes, and in a daze he remembered where he was. He'd been meditating near the river. The
So in writing, they say one of the worst things you can do is start off with a flashback, or like a dream sequence or something that's like not real. Like you write this whole thing or whatever, and it comes to find out that it wasn't real. It was made up. Or you have this whole thing where it's like a dream. The character wakes up. So when I started writing it, I realized that I was falling into that trap. So I said, okay, how can I pivot? I want people to understand that this is the where his pain comes from, but how do I pivot from this being like a dream sequence, you know? So I had it that like he was meditating, but as he was meditating, the memory of losing his parents took over. So that's what that's supposed to play at. And then you'll see how his interactions with Rue go. Two main characters, Uzuma and Rue.
Mosquito buzzed around his head as if it was annoyed at him for interrupting its sleep, and a frog hopped over to him while water droplets flicked off its skin. He focused all his energy using the power of Boko to lift the stones from the river. As the blue aura of his Boko caressed the rocks, he felt a tingling sensation as if it touched each stone, as if he were physically holding them. One by one, he placed them carefully on top of each other. He was determined to master levitation as soon as possible and was pleased to see the stack of 6 stones. The sound of the flowing stream, the chirp of the birds, and the rustle of the trees usually brought him peace, but today was different. His thoughts were filled with memories of that night, the night he watched his village burn as Baku dragged him away to safety and he lost everyone he loved.
And we get the first mention of Baku. Baku is the one who saved them when they were children, and he had adopted them, you know, um, and they are the only survivors of this attack. Um, but we don't know like who the village was attacked by. We don't know why the village was attacked. We just know that the village was attacked. Baku saved them, and then he ended up raising them as his own sons. And he came to care for them over time because they were young boys. And Baku was rising in the ranks of the Askari. So you see how this one moment of Uzuma village being ransacked by these outcasts, you kind of see how this moment affects all of their lives. This is the not the inciting incident. This is like the spark of what sets all their journeys. It's the spark for Ru, Uzuma, and in a way Baku, because that moment forever changes him, and you'll see why.
Fear and grief still lingered in his heart, and no matter how much solace he found in nature, his thoughts kept dragging him back to that painful night. Rue shouted out, "Uzuma!" once more, and a bright yellow blast of Boko came rushing out of his hands and knocked over Uzuma's stones. The blast wasn't explosive, but it managed to disturb Uzuma's tranquil environment. Rue couldn't help his actions. It was how he had been since they were children, and even more so since Baku had taken them as his sons. For that reason, Uzuma just let Rue be. Rue's face split into a proud grin as he pointed to a mound of charred rubble. "My use of Boko is getting stronger," he said with a hint of pride in his voice. "What are you doing out here anyway? We were waiting for you to head out." "Thanks for ruining my meditation. Did you have to knock over my stones?" Uzuma asked. He pushed himself up from the ground, his eyes meeting his.
This is going to be my critique of the voice artist. Like I said, I love most of the stuff that he does, but sometimes it's hard to tell who's talking because he does them all with pretty much the same inflections. And when he is doing like a woman character, he does raise his inflections, they sound more feminine. But when it comes to like certain characters, it's hit or miss. He does a good job. I'm pretty sure the more he does it, the better he'll get. I think he does a better job on the prelude book for the comic book that's coming out. But other than that, like I really have no real critiques right now. But you can kind of see like the characters pretty much sound the same. And it might be my fault on my writing. I'm still learning how to write dialogue to where like all the characters you can tell who they are by just reading the words. You know, they each have different ways of speaking. Uzuma and Rue, they kind of speak the same. It's just that Rue is more. I mean, yeah, Rue is more random. You know, his thoughts, whatever comes to his head, he'll say it. Whereas Uzuma is more deliberate.
Brother by law. Rue stood at least a head taller than Uzuma. He wore long-sleeved black dashiki and blue pants, belted loosely round him, that hung like a tent over his tall, thin body. Rue scoffed. "Meditating? Whoosh. That's not going to help you get better with Boko. I already know 2 spells. "Oh yes," Uzuma sneered, "and you've mastered being weak at both of them."
Now, I modeled the dynamic of Uzuma and Rue's brotherhood and friendship off of my own childhood experiences. Rue is more or less myself. Uzuma is more or less my best friend growing up, Shane. And so I kind of modeled their personalities and the kind of way they banter with each other off of all those old conversations that me and my homies would have. I even have two other friends, Marquise, my other friend Antonio, rest in peace. Um, that I have two other characters in the book, which is Beatrice and Aoife, who are modeled after them, and we kind of all keep that like that banter. And I try to make the characters as close to our real life personalities as possible, by giving them their own originality. So that's where all like the banter and the playful back and forth come from.
He let out an uproar of laughter, then locked in a brotherly embrace with Rue. All right, Uzuma said. Now, where are the others? Waiting by the village gates. Diallo's probably pressing them about leaving. Let's hurry. I want to head out before nightfall. What? We were waiting on you. The village of Pamal was a stone's throw from the river. The homes were large and sturdy, with wooden roofs and stone steps leading up to their double doors. The village was one of the richest in the kingdom of Woodland. It had been Uzuma's home for years now. The elders of the village enjoyed the comforts of
Oh,
life.
you're hot now.
Most had served the chieftain or the war chief for years and had grown old in their service. There were whispers among the villagers that Baku had the potential to be a great war chief had he not been dealt a wound that would scar him for life.
Baku's wound. I don't know if it's like a would be considered a reoccurring motif or a MacGuffin, whatever these writing terms are, but everything ties back to Baku's wound because he got the wound while saving Uzuma and Ru, and you kind of see how the wound affects his body.
The wound inflicted by the same man who had ruined Uzuma's childhood had still haunted him. They walked past the lion's den, the official meeting hall for all who wished to speak with the chieftain. The lion's den was a long stone building with a brick roof and a single door in the front and back leading into it. The official meeting place of the ruling class, it served as a gathering place for the heads of important families. They came together to settle disputes and affairs of the kingdom. A banner hung from the lintel of the entrance, depicting the symbol of the Askari, a red circle with two spearheads forming an X with a third perpendicularly down the center, blade end down. Closer to the door, another banner displayed a white lion's head, the symbol of the kingdom of Woodland.
Every kingdom has a correlating animal that represents it. So in this kingdom, see, where are they? Woodland, that's the kingdom called, in the village of Pamal. Their symbol is the lion. Others, the crocodile, the hyena, rhino. You'll see as the story goes on.
Two Askari spearmen stood guard outside the entrance. Tall.
And also too, when you read Blackguard Way of the Askari, the chapter headings, depending on what character it is, it'll have like those symbols. Like it might have a lion or a rhino or whatever.
Muscular men with dark skin, thick beards, and long spears. Their eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, alert and prepared. I hope I won't end up like these Askari, Rue said. I want to become an elite blackguard, travel and take out outcasts wherever I find them. You do know you must actually be good with Boko to become an elite, Uzuma said. Rue snorted dismissively. Like I was saying, just standing there like a statue, it's so boring. Well, sure, but think about it. They're protecting the leader of our kingdom. It takes a real badass to be bestowed such an honor.
You might think this conversation is nothing. It's just them having a random conversation about two guards, but it's actually showing the difference between their ambitions. Rule wants to aspire to be something great, whereas Uzuma mind is always somewhere else.
Be me. I want to be out there in the real world, helping people and defending those who cannot defend themselves. Well, if I become an Askari, when, Rue corrected. When I become an Askari, Uzuma nodded, I'll hunt down the ones responsible for destroying our home and make them pay. Perhaps I'll even become an elite. Not by just meditating, Rue said, pointing. Look, there they are. Since Pamal wasn't a large village, they reached the gate quickly. The plan was to venture down the stream flowing from Mount Yakin. heading towards Nguk Forest. If Diallo, the gatekeeper, granted them permission to leave the village, they were itching for the chance to prove themselves against the wild animals.
At this point, we've had several names, places, people, characters, and you can notice that all the names are of some type of African descent. I wanted to make a story that was wholly original in its own world, but without the inspiration of being tied strictly to one region in Africa. Most fantasy stories are always like European or Egyptian, and I wanted to pull away from that, do something that was more tribal based and more, and more, what's the word, diverse when it comes to, you know, being inspired by, other past mythological stories and stuff. So I pulled a lot from different African myths and legends and kingdoms to create my characters and my worlds.
Beatrice was already engaged in a game of wit with the gate.
Also, fun thing, if you look at the map within the book, it's based off of LA, Los Angeles. That's where I grew up. I grew up in the city of Compton. So like Mock Punt is Compton, Woodland, Linwood. Then you have other places like Sonark, Carson, Rock Train, Torrance. So every in the whole overall country is called Soganese, which is this Los Angeles. And so, fun fact, if you ever get a chance to look at the map, you can see like how I did that.
Guard as they approached. He was short, and his dark skin was a deep ebony. He was the son of the chieftain, and it was clear in the way his mind worked, swift and calculating, with his responses both sharp and humorous. His knowledge, while still young and growing, was vast and almost on par with his father's. Aoife stood by, watching the guard's futile attempts to reason with Beatrice. Aoife towered over most others in the village, but he was still dwarfed by Rue. He was broad-shouldered and muscular. His skin was a few shades lighter than a warm tan, and some said he was colorless due to his family's being from the Nadau kingdom. It was rumored that all the people were of a lighter complexion there. Hence, in my capacity as your chieftain-elect, allow me to present the rationale for my inspection of our surrounding agricultural lands. I am obliged to gauge the state of our local agrarian pursuits, as a recent storm has caused structural and compositional changes to the local ecosystem, which, given our vicinity to said ecosystem, could have significant ramifications for our village, Beatrice explained with conviction. Eva's hands cupped Rue's and Uzuma's as he welcomed them with a boisterous grip. What's going on here? Uzuma asked. Well, Eva began, Beatrice has been stressing the significance of something that's actually very insignificant to Diallo. And what about these three? Diallo said, pointing to Aoife, Uzuma, and Rue. Diallo had on the customary uniform of the Askari, a blue dashiki with blue pants, stitched on.
The Askari wear blue. Now, somebody said, oh, they wear blue because the police, blue line or whatever. The Askari represent the police. Yeah, or it could be Crip. Blue could Crip because I grew up in the Crip neighborhood. Just saying, that's all. Use your imagination. You know what I mean?
On the left shoulder was the symbol of the Askari, a small black circle with two lines at an X and a third going down the middle.
But the Askari do represent like the police in a fantastical kind of way because they do run things similar to how the police would run things in our real lives.
The Askari spearmen, such as Diallo, typically served as guards and protectors, usually functioning as sentries or to look after someone of status like the chieftain. My personal bodyguards, Beatrice said. Is that so? Diallo asked skeptically. It's not a wise decision for you young men to be venturing into Nguk Forest with a storm looming on the horizon, especially in your case, Chieftain Biruk's son. My father will not be upset, I assure you. Just be back before nightfall. As Diallo signaled, the heavy wooden gate shuddered into life with a loud creak and slowly swung open. As the boys stepped outside, Askari spearmen stood watchful and still, their long spears gleaming in the sunshine. When the boys had passed by, the gate clanged shut with a resounding thud. It never ceases to amaze me, Uzma exclaimed. It's incredible how you can talk your way into or out of any situation. Ah, my dear friend, I have perfected the art of swindling, Beatrice boasted. Your father's the chieftain, Rura.
And again, you see more of that banter. Beatrice is like, oh, I'm a swindler. And Rue's like, man, that's because your dad is the boss. Like, get out of here.
Marked. Correct, but that doesn't change the fact that I can swindle my way out of any situation. Yeah, right, said Rue. The boys had arrived at the edge of Nguk Forest. The oak trunks were round and blotched with green moss. They were wide, and their roots rose from the ground like broken fingers laced with tiny cracks. The branches spread out like pear blossoms, blocking the sunlight from the forest floor, creating a dark canopy for their leaves to grow in. Their leaves were large and shimmery, reflecting whatever light filtered through the branches. The brush underneath was thick. The boys wove around the trees and entered the grove, making their way slowly down the path. Aoife rummaged through the shrubbery, pushing the branches out of the way to search through the brush. "Aoife," Rue said, "you good?" "Where is it?" He fisted his hand in the dirt and the grass and gently felt around until he found a brown sack. He yanked it from beneath the ground and set it down. "Found it!" He rummaged through the bag and pulled out a broken spear and a few rusty swords. He tossed one sword to each of his companions before grasping the spear for himself. "What are these for?" Uzma asked. "Just to protect ourselves." "Why do we get these rusty old swords?" Rue asked. "Not like I'm needed, being a powerful Blackguard." Beatrice laughed. "Powerful Blackguard my ass," he said. "I've borne witness to your so-called skills. You, above all of us, especially need a sword." Uzma and Aoife laughed in agreement. "Shut
Lovely
up!"
banter.
"That's the best I could manage. Believe me, it wasn't easy to get these without my dad knowing," Aoife said. "Let's get moving," Rue urged. "I don't want to be stuck out here if a storm moves in." Uzma examined the sword in his palm, seeking some comfort in its familiar weight. The hilt remained well preserved, but the blade had spots of rust and was dull. He wished he could sharpen it, as if that alone could give him the confidence he longed for to face the unknown dangers of Nguk. Some were just stories told around fires, but Uzma couldn't help but wonder what waited for him beyond his home. "Uzma!" Rue shouted. Uzma had been standing in place while the others were already well away, walking into the forest. He shook his head and sprinted after them.
There you have it, man. Chapter 1, the introductory chapter. So we get the two main characters. We understand how they feel about the Askari. We see how they feel about the relationship with their adoptive father, or at least we see how Uzma feels about it. A little bit. We go into more detail as the chapters go on, but you kind of see the dynamic and how it is so far. And plus, you got the four friends. You got Rue, Uzma, Aoife, and Beatrice. Now, so story continues on. Beatrice and Aoife are no longer in it, but we kind of see their dynamic, which sets up other stuff for later books. And with the introduction of us learning about Uzuma and Rue's village being destroyed, when we get to the second book, which I've already started writing, we see that from Rue's perspective. So we see the moment when Rue gets to Uzuma's home and everything's burnt down, and Uzuma's sitting there cuddling his mother's dead body. So we see that from Rue's perspective in the next book. I think I did a pretty good job writing it, if I don't say so myself. Yes. But make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy listening to this audiobook with me. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Blackguard. Way of the Askari is a hit with readers. A captivating novel where magic, morals, and warriors converge. Join the adventure that readers can't get enough of. Order your copy today. Blackguard. Way of the Askari.